So, biliary system. So we think about the biliary system as being just the gallbladder, but there's a lot more to it than that. So we have the gallbladder itself, intrahepatic ducts, which we typically don't see unless things are awry. We have the right and left, so our bile is flowing from those biliary caniculi is going into the right and left hepatic ducts, then into the common hepatic duct, and then we have the cystic duct hanging off, which we don't typically see, and we have common bile ducts. So everything from common hepatic duct down to the pancreas is what we consider our extrahepatic ducts. So those are the ones we do visually see. We're going to do some measurements in here. The one that we don't typically see is the cystic duct that connects the extrahepatic biliary ducts to the neck of the gallbladder. So here we are. We have all these little tiny bile ducts up here. Unless we have some sort of obstruction, whether there's a stone within the duct or whether there's a mass causing compression on the duct, we don't typically see these intrahepatic ducts dilated. We talked a little bit about that with liver pathology. Remember, like those obstructive pathologies we spoke about? So in this case, we have a right hepatic and left hepatic confluencing to become our common hepatic duct. Typically, these are less than 2 millimeters, and this is going to join with the cystic duct. And the cystic duct has kind of a two-way valve in here. They're called spiral valves, or valves of Heister. And they allow bile to go into the gallbladder and be stored, and then when cholecystokinin kicks in, hormone, we're going to learn about it in a few minutes, then they reverse the flow of bile and allow that bile to go towards that pancreatic duct. On ultrasound, because we can't see that where that cystic duct connects, we just call anything extrahepatic common bile duct, or we'll call it extrahepatic biliary duct. So we don't make much of a distinction because we don't see that cystic duct, so we can't see exactly where the common hepatic duct ends and the common bile duct starts. So they either all get the generic name of common bile duct, or they all get the generic name of extrahepatic biliary duct, just depending on where you're at and who you ask. Okay, so cystic duct. So bidirectional flow of bile. We don't typically see this unless there's some sort of obstruction, but it's going to attach our extrahepatic duct, so it's kind of the landmark for where we have common hepatic that turns into common bile, and then he's going to attach to the neck of the gallbladder. So common bile duct, so he's going to be after our cystic duct. As a general rule, I think your book says less than 6 millimeters. In my work, we use a millimeter per decade. So if I have a 90-year-old, they can have a 9 millimeter bile duct. If I have a 30-year-old, 30 millimeter, 3 millimeter bile duct. And then what we consider proximal is going to be towards the liver because the bile is flowing in this direction. So proximal is going to be at the liver. Mid's going to be somewhere in midland, and then distal is going to be where it terminates at the head of the pancreas. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but he and the pancreas are very good friends. If my patient had a post-cholecystectomy, who was that? Who was it? Who had their gallbladder out?
Oh, she left. Nicola.
Was it her? Okay, yeah. And so she may have up to a 10 millimeter bile duct. Okay, so common bile duct. Prox is going to be at that porta hepatis, so where we're leaving the liver. The common hepatic duct as well as the common bile duct are going to be part of that portal triad. The whole thing is. So we may see down in here some main portal vein. And so our main portal vein is going to live posterior or extrahepatic ducts, whether it is our common hepatic or common bile. And this marker sucks. And let's get a new one. So here's kind of that main portal vein. He's going to enter the liver as well. Remember our portal triad, your best friends. So just as this is going to bifurcate into the left hepatic and right hepatic, we're going to have that right portal and that left portal kind of following that same course. So they live together even at the microscopic level. So mid is what we consider pre-pancreas. So this is going to be our prox up here. Mid going to be somewhere in here. And then our distal is going to be at that pancreas. Where this joins the pancreas, it's going to poke through the posterior aspect of this pancreatic head, and then it's going to form what we call, they're going to confluence with what we call the ampulla of Vater. And the ampulla of Vater is where my panc duct is coming in, my common bile duct is coming in, they confluence together, and then there's a little circular sphincter around it called the sphincter of Oddi. And the sphincter of Oddi is going to relax and allow pancreatic juices as well as bile from the common bile duct into the duodenum. So these guys are really good friends right at this panc head. Okay, so let's kind of look at what this looks like. So we've got this main portal vein coming in, bifurcating into the right and the left. Because we're portal triad, that hepatic artery is doing the same thing, so it's coming in through the porta hepatis. He's also going to bifurcate into the right and the left. And then these are going the opposite direction, but we've got our right confluencing with our left, following that portal triad out of the porta hepatis, and then we're headed down towards pancreas. You can see, I'm sorry, okay, so we're not seeing much of the liver stuff here, but we've got our cystic duct, so this is our extrahepatic biliary duct. This is going to be our common hepatic, and then as it confluences with that cystic duct, it becomes our common bile duct. He's going to pierce through that posterior aspect of the pancreas. He's going to join, what I don't think you see it very well, and he's going to join with that, what we call the Wirsung duct of Wirsung, and they're going to confluence together. There's that ampulla of Vater, is this whole area. There's a muscular ring called the sphincter of Oddi, and when it relaxes, it allows biliary juice or bile, and then it allows pancreatic juices to flow into the duodenum. So this might be after a fatty meal. This is why our patients have postprandial pain. You're going to learn about cholecystokinin. It's the hormone that deals with this. It's responsible for the stimulation, the relaxation of the sphincter of Oddi, as well as the valves of Heister in the gallbladder. It allows that bile to kind of creep into the duodenum. Oh man, look at this. So this is kind of how this is going to work. So this duodenum is kind of superimposed over this pancreas. So this bile duct is going through the posterior aspect of this pancreas, kind of towards the anterior. Our pancreatic duct is going along the pancreas, confluencing with this, and then again going into that duodenal fold. All right, so here's how this kind of looks. It's like kind of a cutaway. So here is our common hepatic, cystic, those confluence together to become the common bile. Again, out in the real world, we're just calling this whole thing called common bile or extrahepatic biliary ducts. We have our pancreatic duct, which is also known as the duct of Wirsung, which we'll talk about with panc in a second. These are going to confluence together. They have a little muscular sphincter around them, the sphincter of Oddi, and then they're going to, when that relaxes, the valves of Heister up here are going to relax, this guy's going to relax. It's going to allow that bile to flow into the water after a fatty meal. So we've got a little bit of dilation going on here. So we're looking at our millimeter per decade. This guy better be 170 years old, which I don't think is going to happen. So we've got some dilation. So here's our main portal vein. See a little bit of hepatic artery just kind of creeping around in here. And here's our dilated common bile duct. We have to put color on our bile ducts to prove that it's a bile duct. Otherwise, I could be like, yeah, that's just a portal vein. Everything's fine. Go to court, they're like, oh, this was a 17 millimeter common bile duct. You're like, oh, I didn't know. I didn't put color on it. So we prove it by putting that color on that there should be no flow. Additionally, when we see this main portal vein, we think of that portal triad as being very stick straight. Everybody's following along. And that common bile duct, I guess I go this way for good. That common bile duct and that main portal vein are kind of that way. But the hepatic artery is a little bit like ketchup on a hot dog. It kind of goes back and forth and back and forth. And so oftentimes we'll catch him in cross section. We don't usually catch that hepatic artery in length like we see the common bile duct and the main portal vein running very stick straight next to each other. Now, if I have obstruction, I'm going to go downstream. So if I have intrahepatic ductal dilatation here, I'm going to look at my extrahepatic ducts. If I have ductal dilatation here, I'm going to look towards the pancreas. So I probably have a stone or a mass or something downstream that's causing this to back all the way up into the biliary tree. I'm not going to be having a mass out here. I mean, I could be too, but that's not going to be causing obstruction here. This is all flowing in this direction. So somewhere we've got a blockage. We want to investigate downstream to see where that blockage is. So here's CVD at the porta hepatis. So here's our main portal vein here, and the reason I selected this image, so here's our dilated common bile duct, but look how clean you can see where the right and the left confluence together. So we've got right hepatic duct, left hepatic duct confluencing together to become the common hepatic, extrahepatic, whatever you call it, common hepatic, extrahepatic. Here's another one. So IBC slightly cross, IBC and slightly cross section, portal vein and slightly cross section. Here's our common bile duct, and here's a little bit of that cross section of the hepatic artery. He's just kind of coursing his way through there. We never really see him stick straight. He's just kind of like ketchup on a hot dog. Okay, so now that was kind of us at like 10 o'clock and kind of transverse on the body. And now we're going to go a little bit more towards pank land. And what we'll see is, so we talked about this already. So here's aorta, SMA. We talked a little bit about that portal splenic confluence. Here's our pancreas here. So this is going out that way towards the spleen. I have the SMV, IMV running in this way. Here's our portal venous complex. And then at the very head of our pancreas, we have two little eyeballs. So one of them is going to be, if I put color on, this is going to be the gastroduodenal artery and it will light up. This is going to be the common bile duct and it won't light up. But they look like two little eyes on the head of the pancreas. So cute. So more posterior common bile duct, more anterior gastroduodenal artery. So that was us at kind of 10 o'clock. So now we're going to go more true sag on the body. And this is the Mickey Mouse sign we discussed earlier. So that portal vein and the portal triad recurs in this direction. So I'm going to go 90 degrees on it and see everybody in cross section. So in that case, I've got my main portal vein in cross section here, my hepatic artery, and my common bile duct. So if I'm in sag on the body, what direction is this compared to this? Where's my common bile duct in relation to my hepatic artery?
Superior.
Superior, right? We're in sag on the body, so superior, inferior. And both of these are going to be anterior to the main portal vein. So CBD, superior, hepatic artery, inferior.
What is the Korean transverse?
It's like this in the body, so when we're seeing it in cross section, we are in sagittal. They cruise this direction. So if we're in transverse, we're going to see them in length. So that was this guy. Okay. Because they're draining from the mesentery to the liver. So like more like,
So they're like tilted.
10 o'clock-ish, yeah. And then if we go more sag on the body, that's what we're going to start to see in the cross section. Okay, here's another one. So here's that portal vein. We've got the two little Mickey Mouse here. So more superior is going to be that common bile duct. More inferior is going to be that hepatic artery, and then there's our portal vein.
And the long one, IVC?
Obliquely IVC, yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to get too crazy with you guys with a lot of this stuff because it's more physiology and you'll get it in Rain's class. But basically, this is how this stuff starts. We have the caniculi of the hepatocytes. So it's metabolizing, it's creating bile. Then it goes to the intrahepatic ducts. So we're like from cellular level coming to the kind of tree branches. Then we have that right and left hepatic duct. Those are going to confluence down. We're going to go common hepatic duct through the cystic duct for storage in the gallbladder, out the cystic duct for when we're using him, down the common bile duct, through that posterior aspect of the pancreatic head, joining up with the pank duct, the duct of Wirsum. There's an accessory duct in here we don't talk about really. There's that ampulla of Otter with the sphincter of Oddi, and then eventually we're going to deposit that into the duodenum. Sounds easy, right? Yeah, so easy. Not a huge bile thing. Okay, so spiral valves, or what we call these valves of Heister, live in the neck of the gallbladder. These can be mistaken for pathology when we scan. We might see them look like little teeny tiny bright things in the neck of the gallbladder. Like, oh my God, it's a stone! It's a stone! It's a stone! No, it's not, Shea. You're an idiot. They just kind of live there and they don't move. They aren't mobile. They don't really shadow, but they're going to be these little tiny maybe echogenic spots in the neck of the gallbladder. And when we have cholecystokinin, so that's when we eat fatty foods, the duodenum basically says, I need what we call CK something, I don't know, CKK or whatever, where you can tell you that, I don't feel that. And then so, then it's going to relax that sphincter of Oddi, it's going to relax those valves of Heister and allow that, the pressure will allow that, the relief of that will allow the pressure to move downstream and into the duodenum. So sphincter of, oh, what happened? I want to cut off here. Oh, and may have pank fluids with no bile from the CBD. So if we don't have this cholecystokinin being stimulated, if we are eating, say we're just eating something that's just pure protein, and so we need something from the pancreas but not the biliary tree, we could have just pancreatic juices being deposited, not bile. Okay, so it's a reservoir for bile. They're very slug-shaped. They say pear, but they look like a slug to me. And it's going to be on that kind of, you guys have seen it kind of go by already, I'm sure when you were scanning livers, really scanning, kind of on that inferior aspect, might be near the kidney. As we roll these patients, so the neck is attached to the right portal vein through the main lobar fissure, the mill. And so as I roll my patient, these can go all the way over to the left side. So you're like, where was it? I just saw it. You just have to go maybe past that aorta to find your gallbladder again. So they're attached at the neck, but they can kind of be like a pendulum in some places. Size-wise, up to 10 centimeters or up to 4.5. And if they get enlarged, I'm going to be like, where is the obstruction? What is going on? And we call that a hydropic gallbladder. Write that down. Hydropic. Let me write it down with the worst pen I've ever seen in my entire life. It was going right into the past pen. And we'll talk about this in pathology later as well.
It's like water.
Yep, fluid-filled gallbladder. So if I say your gallbladder is sagittal, here's my transverse. Now, depending on where you work and who you're talking to, if I measure the same and it's greater than 10, or if I measure it here and it's greater, this is my TRV, this is my sag, greater than 4 to 5, just depending on where you work, it's considered hydropic. And we'll talk about that in pathology. The other thing we're going to do that's very, 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 very important is we're going to measure the wall thickness on these bad boys. So there's a pathology, well, you can get it for a couple different reasons, but you know about gallstones, right? Oh, my gall bag. So gallstones can cause what's called cholecystitis, that was almost it. And so you'll get inflammation of the gallbladder wall. And that can lead to gallbladder wall rupture. It can be problematic. It's a surgical emergency. We'll talk all about it later. But we're going to measure the gallbladder wall. We want to measure it in the anterior aspect because it's harder to see the posterior aspect. And we're going to try to measure it as flat to our beam as we can get. Typically, less than 3 millimeters is normal, but we usually see them at about 2 millimeters. Oh. Okay, so we have 3 regions to the gallbladder. So we have, and there's no actual distinction, like, oh, at this point it becomes this. We just know somewhere in here we have a neck. Somewhere in here we have a body. And somewhere in here we have a fundus. And the fundus is just the very end. Now if I have a stone stuck here, I know for sure it's in the fundus. If I have a stone stuck here, I know for sure it's in the neck. Anywhere else, I just call it lumen of the gallbladder body. You're not quite sure where things begin and where things end. It's just 3 different sections. You can have what's called a Hartmann's pouch. And so this is where the neck of the gallbladder either has an outpouching or it's folded over. And we'll see some of those here in a few minutes. And then as far as the body goes, we can have what's called junctional folds. And these are the literal worst ones to scan because you're like, am I seeing a fold or is this a septation? Is it folded or is it septated? And so those can be kind of hard to determine the pathology on. And then the last one happens in the fundus and it's called a Frisian hat. And it looks like, remember the Smurfs? It looks like a Smurf hat at the very top of your gallbladder. Okay, so here we have a regular gallbladder. Not very well centered, done by one of the students. Aneurysm depth. So here's our neck. So that neck is always, and we don't see the portal vein very well, but that neck's always going to have that echogenic vein lobar fissure. It's going to connect it to that right portal vein. So here's our neck. Coming into body land, somewhere in here, and then here's our arms. They look like slugs, hair shaped slugs.
So where's the portal vein?
I'm not seeing it. All I see is a portion of the vein lobar fissure. So this is vein lobar fissure. We aren't seeing the portal vein. Okay. We're like oblique on it. Here's another one. So here's a little bit of IVC. We're going to squeak it around down here. Not seeing that main lobar fissure, but here's our neck, all the way to our fundus. If you don't know whether it's the neck or the fundus, whichever part is closest to the right portal vein is going to be the neck. So if you have like a U-shaped gallbladder, you're like, which one's closer to the right portal vein? That's going to be your neck. Okay, so here's our Frisian cap. So we've got actually a little bit of a junctional fold at the neck. So here's our neck down here. You can kind of see that little bit of fold there coming into our body. And then here's our little hat. Here's our little Frisian cap on the very fundal portion of the gallbladder.
Is that normal or?
Yep. because you're like, am I clearing out every corner of this gallbladder? Am I sure that I'm seeing every portion of this gallbladder? But they can be very, very folded. So if this was my patient, I might have them sit up for a little while and see if that weight of that gallbladder will kind of unfold that. And just kind of lengthen it out a little bit. You might have them even jump up and down a little bit just to see if you can lengthen that gallbladder. Because this is crazy making.
If you don't manage to get it, what do you do?
You just put gallbladder limited, do your folded gallbladder, you know. And you're going to try to clear out all the nooks and crannies. But it's hard to get true sagits on them or true transverse. So your transverse ends up looking, you know, like a weird snowman with all these little pieces in it. So you just say folded gallbladder. Yes, this is fun. So is this pathologic or is it folded?
It seems like
up to us to figure it out.
septation.
So it could be septated, could just be a bunch of folds in there. So we would have to kind of like go through, start at the neck, walk your way through all the different parts and see if you could get them to be kind of like chambers that are just folded, or whether there's a whole obstruction, there's a whole kind of septation in there that isn't going anywhere. These are not that common, so don't get too scared. Most of the time you're going to see pretty normal. Okay, so we can have some congenital abnormalities. Duplicated. Okay, we've got 2 gallbladders. We may have with that 1 or 2 cystic ducts. Either 2 gallbladders hanging off a single cystic duct, or maybe we have 2 cystic ducts. Abnormal shape, so long and lean, those multiple folds. Sometimes those folds don't unfold, which is kind of the way it is. Abnormal location. So you can actually get these where they're kind of developmentally, they ended up being encapsulated by the liver. And so you go LLD and you're like, why is this thing not moving? What is going on here? It's actually encapsulated by the liver. And then sometimes I'll put that multiple folds. We can have those that don't unfold. I'm wrong. Ectopic location. So maybe I have a gallbladder and it has a really long cystic duct and it lives inferior to my right kidney. And I'm like, where is this thing? And then I go to my kidney. I'm like, there's a gallbladder here. Why is this thing living here? Or maybe it's on the left side. The cystic duct goes all the way past that pancreas. So we can have ectopic locations as well. Abnormal fusion of ducts, and that brings us to what we call biliary atresia. Atresia is the lack of something growing. Like, I wasn't born with it. I don't know. It's not that it was atrophic and went away. It was atresia. It was never there. We can live without a gallbladder. We can't live without biliary ducts. So if you have a fetus or a neonate, it's like jaundice, and like, what is going on with this thing? Shea, come in and scan this thing. I'm like, it has a bile duct that terminates. There's no gallbladder to it. It doesn't connect with the duodenum. They'll actually go in there and they'll stent through so that this bile can get drained. If the bile isn't able to be drained, it will back up into the liver. It will cause destruction of the liver cells, and eventually you'll have liver failure. And your babies will be all yellow. You know. So unless only the gallbladder is missing, if there's some other level of atresia, then we're going to have to go into surgery. Yeah.
When it's like a duplicated gallbladder, how do you know it's a gallbladder and not maybe like some sort of like a cyst or mass or something like that?
It'll look like a gallbladder. It'll look like one. And its neck will be kind of like right next to the neck of the other gallbladder. So it won't be like off in no man's land. There'll be basically a cystic duct with 2 gallbladders coming out.
Okay.
Okay, physiology. So bile is made by hepatocytes. This is kind of more of a rain thing for you. We're not going to get too crazy in physiology because it's cross-sectional. But these will emulsify fats. So oftentimes patients who have had their gallbladders removed, sometimes they have a harder time eating fats, or they get like kind of like upset stomach or diarrhea after this because their body can't emulsify the lipids that they're eating. So they have to go on like lean better diet, no hot pockets, no pizza rolls, and that sort of thing. I'm going through this chocolate milk phase right now. My parents are like, girl, you better stop that or you're going to find more of us. Anyway, okay. So here we are again, just showing that same picture. Kind of seeing how it interacts with the pancreas a little bit. This is a little bit more simplified version. So this is going to be within the liver, so this is going to be intrahepatic. We start getting extrahepatic with that common hepatic. We've got the cystic, we've got the common bile. Again, out in the real world, we kind of refer to this whole thing as common bile or extrahepatic biliary duct. He's going to poke through the posterior superior, we saw it, posterior superior aspect of the pancreatic head. He's going to join with the duct of Bourson, and this is, you don't need to know about this, but there's a different duct in here. And then we've got that ampulla of Vader, and then that sphincter of OB. And so this is what's going to relax and allow that bile. And then our valves of Heister will also relax, and it will allow that bile to flow right into the duodenum to emulsify our fats.
So the valve of Heister is up closer to the gallbladder, the
It's in the
ampule.
gallbladder neck. Those are those spiral valves.
Oh, okay.
Yep, valves of Heister, spiral valves. Why not have 3 names for one body?
Yeah.
Why not? Okay, so we'll get into this with labs, so I don't expect you to kind of memorize it today. This is something we'll get into later. But we want to be NPO. So as our patients are eating, I went to, the taco store, I ate a bunch of tacos, my body's trying to emulsify those fats, and so my gallbladder is going to contract. And so how do I know if my gallbladder is contracting because it's abnormal or because I ate? And so these patients we want to do evaluations for gallbladder on, we're going to make sure that they're NPO for at least 6 to 8 hours. Sometimes I can't do that because my patient's in the ER and they're usually correct. And so if that's the case, I have to say patient not NPO. So if they have a contracted gallbladder, I'm like, hey dude, I'm just saying I'm not NPO. Could be disease, could be because they ate. I'm not making that call. But if I have a contracted gallbladder, I'll make sure, oh gosh, patient, when was the last time you ate? Oh, I ate 2 days ago, okay. Patient NPO 12 plus hours. Like, hey, it's contracted and they are NPO. So just giving some kind of indication if you have that contracted gallbladder. So we want to evaluate in supine. Supine and LLD are typically the ones that we use, but we can also use upright, we can use RLD. But we want to make sure, because gallbladders like to hide things. And so sometimes I'll roll my patient, they won't have stones necessarily, but I'll roll my patient, and then there's all these like, what we call sludge, or like these little cholesterol crystals that are just raining down and they're like snow. And I'm like, where was that shit when I was looking at it a minute ago? And so we want to make sure we're looking in 2 planes. And so that's one of the few times we have to annotate when our patient's in LLD. So I'll do SAG gallbladder, I'll roll my patient and it becomes annotated SAG gallbladder LLD. I have to prove that I looked at it in 2 planes. And same thing, that contracted gallbladder can mimic disease. That will kind of thicken the walls. We just want to make sure, what are we dealing with? Here? So we're going to measure that anterior wall. You could do SAG or transverse. I typically do SAG because I feel like it's easier to get oblique in transverse, but in SAG I can tell exactly where I'm at. But when you get out in the real world, you're just not a person to do it one way or the other. Sometimes I can only get it in transverse. So it's going to be outer edge to inner edge. So we're measuring the thickness of that actual wall. 3 millimeters or less, but usually 2 is pretty typical. And then we're going to evaluate, this common bile duct, this extrahepatic biliary duct. Now, I'm such a cool sonographer, I'll also measure my common hepatic duct as it leaves the hepatic. But pretty much, we're going to try to elongate this out as much as we can, and we're just going to do a measurement of this. And that's that millimeter per decade, and your book says less than 6. So we'll get to that in a while as well. Okay, so here we have a gallbladder wall. So we've got some oblique guys, who knows what, maybe coordinated, you guys can see. So here's the neck of our gallbladder coming back into our fundus. We're going to measure this anterior wall. Now you can see we've got an okay wall here, but just how refractive some of this gets, it would be hard to say where exactly that wall is. So we're going to do an AP measurement, 90 degrees to the wall, not your screen, but actually to the wall, and get our measurement. Here we are in transverse. You can see it's a little bit easier to get oblique. This is a shitty picture. Okay, there we go. Now this is a diseased gallbladder. This is cholecystitis. So gallbladder neck is somewhere here. Fundus is down here, and you can see just how thick that gets. Not only will it get homogeneously thickened, but sometimes it can get inhomogeneously thickened. We can have either increased vascularity or fluid in the wall. So we put color on to know for sure, but we can either have hyperemia or we can have wall edema. So fluid kind of collecting in that wall, or we've got blood flow increase because it's an infection, right? Itis, cholecystitis. Okay, so we have our contracted gallbladder lumen, and then this entire thing is our wall. Sometimes you get just a part of the wall that's thick, so I'll measure the thick part and the regular part, and I'll say variable wall thickness from 2 millimeters to 5 millimeters. So sometimes you actually have to kind of look around and see, is this whole thing diffusely increased, or is it just one part of it? Why do we think we are thick in this image? Ascites. It's our wet crouton, right? It's our soggy crouton. Okay, so what we're going to tell the radiologist, is there any stones, polyps, which we'll talk about later, little projections within the lumen, masses, how many? Approximate. Some of these are like, you're going to have 50 little tiny gallstones, in like what we call TMTC, too many to count. So TMTC. Like there's too many to count, but I just want to measure this. Other times you're just going to have one. Mobility becomes a really big part of our gallbladder stone assessment. If I have an immobile stone in the gallbladder, surgical emergency. If I have mobile stones, no one cares. How do they go about your business? Vascular wall. With the wall, what was the wall? What were her ducts? And then Murphy's sign is something we'll talk about in pathology. That's just a way to gauge tenderness. And so if I have an ultrasound Murphy sign, I'm like, my patient can be tender to skin. They're like, oh, hey, stop that. Ow, I'm poking them. Ow. But I have ones who are like, like try to run away. It's a positive Murphy sign. It's very specific to the gallbladder. We'll talk about that as we get later on. And then what didn't we see? I saw a dilated common bile duct, but I didn't see any level of obstruction. So we might have a pancreatic head mass that we're going to have to do a little bit more imaging on. So what didn't we see as well? Okay, so duct rehabilitations. We can have intrahepatic, and we'll talk about this in pathology, but that's where we get this kind of dilation within the liver itself, and it will be adjacent to a portal vein. So we call that the double barrel sign or the cataract sign. Is it local or diffuse? Is it just here, or is it diffuse out of the whole liver? And then extrahepatic biliary duct. So we're going to go downstream. Is it because there's a stone in there, or because there's a mass compressing on that area, not allowing our bile to flow? What are we doing with? And then what we didn't see. So the duct was dilated, but I didn't see any evidence of obstruction. So we better get in there and do the CT or do something else. So if we see intrahepatic ducts localized, or they just report hepatitis, they left liver lobe, what are we doing with that? Do we see any stones or masses? Is something compressing on this, or is something obstructing this? Was our gallbladder hydrophic? Did it get enlarged? Is our patient jaundice, indicating like, okay, we're so backed up that then they're like the sclera of their eyes turn yellow, or they get like a yellow kind of pallor? Different story. Okay, so extrahepatic, same thing. So we're going to measure that prox, mid, and distal. Is my proximal portion dilated? Well, we look at the mid and distal to see if there's an obstruction or something compressing on it. If the whole thing is dilated, can I see that pancreas? What am I dealing with? We're going to go downstream. And then same thing, panc duct, is my panc duct dilated? Maybe I have a stone right at that ampulla bottom. And so my pancreas dilates as well as my biliary tree. So what are we dealing with? So here's a polyp. We'll get into this with pathology. But the difference between polyps and stones are going to have that shadow, and polyps don't move. I'm going to move this patient, and then polyps going to be like, oh, take me with you. It's just going to stay on the same wall the whole time. Here's some cholelithiasis, some stones. These are really, really tiny, small guys, too many to count. And then here's that dark shadow. So I'm proving your stones with that dark shadow. Here's what we call adenomyomatosis. And we'll get into this later. And these are just little puffs of cholesterol kind of build up, and they create this artifact called brain. But more on that in pathology. Don't worry about that. That's tomorrow. Okay, so what is this, and how can we optimize it?
Low is the contrast.
Yeah, decrease our contrast, right? So increase our dynamic range. Sometimes, in order to get shadowing out of these stones, I have to go a little bit more contrasty. Not quite, maybe quite like this, but then you always want to make sure you put it back. So like you're not like scanning the liver. It's like, oh my God, this patient has hepatitis too. You're like, no, okay, my setting's really wrong. Just want to make sure you're taking your setting back.
Do we need to change the depth here?
I would say change the depth and probably clear out this fungus. Show me the whole shebang. Okay, what's wrong with this gallbladder?
Wall too thick.
Thick wall?
Thick wall, you got it. So something's going on with that bad boy. Okay, what's wrong with this bad boy?
Stones.
Not stones, we're not shadowing. Remember that when we had that ring down? Yep. Adenomyomatosis. Not to be confused with adenomyosis, which we'll get into with you later. I know. Fun stuff. Terminology, yay. Okay, so there's what we call ERCP. So endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatitis, whatever. So what they'll do is they'll give these patients a dye, basically, and it goes from main portal veins being digested, it comes in here, and then it starts to collect within the hepatics, the intrahepatic ductal system, and then the extrahepatic ductal system, and then they'll watch it go into the pancreas. They're trying to see, is there a problem here? sometimes this will collect in the gallbladder, and it never really makes it further than that. So like, oh, the gallbladder must not be contracting appropriately. So it's just a function. So we can do like, hey, this is what it looks like. Is it functioning? I don't know. This is just what it looks like. So like, you're on Tinder, you see a hot dude. Hey, he looks good. Is he normal? I don't know. He looks good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Who knows? So it's kind of one of those things. We don't do function very well, but we can do appearance. Here's one that they did under CT. So we've got, here's our gallbladder here. So right and left coming together, forming that common hepatic. Well, technically, the common hepatic is really short. Here's that cystic duct right in here. So we're able to see like, oh, are we filling? Is everybody filling? Is it obstructed or not? Oh, here it is going into the, so here's our pancreatic duct. So then here it is coming to the pancreatic duct. So you might have to follow these things up. We don't really have to do much with these. And there's the gallbladder on CT. So here we are in transverse. I know we haven't talked much about imaging modalities. Whereas we see a small snippet of our patient, CT sees the whole thing at once. So anterior, posterior, right, left. So we've got left kidney here, spinal processes. This is all bowel. Do you remember about our Hounsfield units and all that? Density. So this is very low density. So this patient is going to fart like days and days in a row. It's just hugely filled with fart. And then we've got liver over here, and then we've got our gallbladder sitting right here. Okay, so here's an abnormal gallbladder wall. So you can see that we went from, let's go back one. See how kind of uniform this gallbladder wall is? Pretty uniform in thickness. And then we go to one here, and you see they call this sometimes what they call fat stranding. It's not really fat, but you can see it looks like there's kind of strands of stuff coming off the gallbladder. One thing that's important to note, and I've bitched about this for years, but they're always right. See, they'll do a CT, and they're like, follow up CT, we didn't see anything in the gallbladder. Well, okay, it's in the gallbladder, we're following up. And I'm like, oh, there's a stone there. Okay, all right. CT's not very good at looking for stones unless they're very, very dense. And so sometimes they'll be like, not seen on CT, and then I'll get in there and see a bunch of stuff. So as much as I love it, okay, got it, so okay, hide and scan. So this is kind of the same thing that we saw with the fluoroscopy we had a minute ago, but they'll give these patients a radioactive nucleotide, and it collects in their liver, and then it should start slowly going out from the liver to the biliary tree. It will start to fill all of this up. So you can see we're biliary tree, we're kind of going into the pancreas, and then it will start to fill whatever happened, the duodenum itself. So then you can start to see it went from the liver through this biliary tree all the way to the duodenum, and now it's going to be excreted. So just to see how functional this is. Again, we don't really follow it up very much, but you might have an order for an abnormal HIDA scan, but we aren't looking at this going, oh yeah, I see that. Yep. Nuclear medicine is called unclear medicine because of this stuff. Okay. Okay, any questions on gallbladder stuff? All right, so we're going to move into pancreas. Yay! So it's within the epigastrum, and the tail actually communicates with the spleen, and the head and the unsnipped process actually communicate with like that main portal vein at the porta hepatis. So it kind of stretches across the body a little bit. So there's 5 regions. Let's just draw him up here. Let's just draw him. And I don't know why, and I do this, and you'll see your book too. Everyone draws the pancreas like it's a cloud. But when you scan it, it's not a cloud. I think they're trying to get that it's like glandular tissue or something. It's not a cloud. It's not a cloud. But we'll draw like one anyway. Okay, so. And then, so spleen is going to be over here. Spleen. And then our main portal vein, that splenic vein, is going to be coming under here, making this, so this is splenic vein here, and this is going to be main portal vein. And this guy's going to go and he's going to become main portal vein, and then he's going to go into our liver at the porta hepatis. So these guys communicate significantly. But he's kind of, The guy who's like, hey, spleen, give me all your blood and we'll take it into the liver and it's going to run along. So we have 5 regions. So we have the head, which is kind of the very front here, and that's where that CVD and that GDA are. Then we have what's called the uncinate process. So it's considered part of the head, but it's the part that kind of hooks under our main portal vein.
It's like behind.
Kinda. It's not really behind, it's posterior. But he hooks around the main portal vein. So imagine this is garbage. Okay, yes, we can imagine that because it is garbage. Okay, I know that. I thought I had a better screen. Okay, so the uncinate, so we have this main portal vein. This is supposed to be main portal vein, hepatic artery, and biliary. So this is our portal triad. But can you see how the uncinate kind of wraps around? So he's kind of like hooking around that main portal vein. So that main portal vein, portal triad is coming up this way, and the uncinate kind of hooks under him. So he's part of the head, but he's just this little tiny hook. And eventually we're going to look at him in this way, and we're going to see him a little bit differently.
Posterior.
Inferior, and when we look at it this way, it will be posterior. So this would be us looking at it. We look this direction. This is like the two, so we would look like this. That makes sense. We're just pulling in a slice like that. But it's just this little kind of hooked guy. And so this is main portal vein, hepatic artery, not to scale. And so the uncinate is just this little hook that wraps right around that guy. Tony will help you with that one. Okay, so we had our head, uncinate, so that main portal vein, kind of wrapping around that main portal vein. And then we have our neck, body, and tail. Tails are notoriously difficult to see and to clear out because they drop so retroperitoneally. So there's a whole box on my worksheets at work that says tail not seen. Like, it's just so common that it's just a whole check box. Okay, so endocrine and exocrine. So we can use it to control blood sugar for insulin, or we can do pancreatic digestive enzymes. And you'll get into this more with Rain. I'm not going to really ask you about them, but let's talk about them. So endocrines, we get alpha, beta, and delta. So glucagon, insulin, somatostatin. So this is kind of an inhibitor. And then we have the exocrines. So these acini cells in the duct it works on. That's what actually combining with our extrahepatic biliary ducts. So the ducts that works on is going to be the digestive, the exocrine portion of this. So these are some of our digestive enzymes. I'm not going to ask you about these. This is a great random thing. But amylase, so that's carbohydrates. I don't know why it only does it with yogurt. I don't know why. Salivary amylase, right? It's the very first portion of digestion. It's like salivary fluid, and it digests starches. And so whenever I eat yogurt, I put my little spoon back in the cup. Is it digesting? Is it starches in my yogurt right now? Digested stuff? I don't know. But anyway, and then lipases, which are for fats, and then some of them are just to peptides, trypsin, and chimera-trypsin. So I'm not going to ask you this. This is something to know. Now, vasculature. Hank is a big deal. He interacts with a lot of vasculature. So one of the things that we know that he talked about, we talked about that SMA. Remember that aorta SMA? He's like, so we have pancreas. Let's draw that image out right now. So we have pancreas here. Portal splenic confluence under here. And it's the spleen gland. This is all anechoic. And then we have that SMA and that aorta. So we know he's really closely related to some vasculature with that SMA and aorta. Additionally, we know that pig has that splenic vein that runs along because of that main portal vein. And then if we go to the very top of this guy, the more anterior portion, he's going to have this splenic artery. So not only does he responsible for kind of housing the artery that goes to the spleen, he also houses the vein that comes back to the spleen. So his tail terminates at the splenic hilum. So he's like, hey, anteriorly, let me take your artery. Oh, posteriorly, let me take your vein. So It's really important with that. And so we'll draw that right here. These guys technically will go spleen right here, spleen, S-P-L-N. So this is going to be our splenic vein, this is going to be our splenic artery. And then additionally, we have, in this direction, the SMV, IMV coming into this. So if you can imagine that there's another little kind of T to this, and that's where the SMV, IMV are coming in. And those are the ones that are actually pulling blood from the mesentery to be put into the portal splenic confluence and sent to the liver. It's kind of like a little T in there. So we have our splenic vein going to become main portal vein. I've got that pancreas, remember the unstent process kind of holding this guy. And then I have SMV, IMV coming in this direction. So we have one from the spleen going towards the lateral right, and then we have two coming from the anterior towards the posterior, towards that portal splenic confluence. And when we scan this, I don't know what day we'll do, 2 weeks from now, we'll scan it in this direction length, and then we'll also scan in this direction, and we'll get to see what we call the panc hamburger. It will be the head, SMV, IMV coming in. So the head, SMV, IMV coming in, and the unstent process. It looks like a hamburger. It's delicious. Okay.
Can you repeat the splenic artery and vein, and what goes in and what goes out?
Arteries going into the spleen, veins coming out of the spleen. So if we look at this bad boy, this is a really shitty one. I think I need this. Okay. So as we're looking at this, pulling this pancreas out of the body, we've got that portal splenic confluence. So it's coming from the spleen all the way over to the main portal vein to the liver. And then where does my splenic artery come from?
Celiac.
This, see, like, remember how aorta is right under this pancreas? So it's going to have, right on top, it's going to say splenic artery, cruise along me and go to the spleen. So one's going to be on the anterior aspect, one's going to be on the posterior aspect. So artery, and if you think about that, it's more superior and anterior. The celiac, it's above the SMA. So the artery is going to be above where the SMA is, where that portal splenic confluence is. So portal splenic confluence, splenic vein. Superior to that, celiac artery, is going to be our splenic artery going to the spleen. So superior anterior, splenic artery, posterior inferior, splenic vein. Artery, no one really cares about, but we do care about that splenic vein. Okay, so this distal CVD, kind of we talked about over here, so he's going to course towards the posterior aspect of that pancreatic head, and we're going to see him as a little eye on the panc head. And so if we see dilation of CVD, we're going downstream, we're going to check his pancreas. And if we see ductal dilatation within the panc, we're going to check the CVD. So these kind of terminate together, they confluence together. So if somebody's dilated, like downstream for duct of panc is here, downstream for CVD is here. So either way, we're going to check that head of the pancreas. So maybe that there was a mass compressing on it, so that adenopancreatinocarcinoma, which we'll get into later, or it could be that there's just a stone in the duct. We don't know. Or both. Maybe all of them. Okay, so here we are. So here's that unstent. See how it kind of wraps around? So our celiac axis, we've got our splenic artery going way out towards the spleen. Coming back, we're not seeing very well, but they kind of shit me on that one. But our splenic vein and SMV, IMV are coming in to form that main portal vein. This may be a little bit better. So here's that splenic artery coursing along, more superior anterior. Here's that splenic vein coming with the SMV, well, IMV, SMV coming in to become that main portal vein. So this is like me, you're looking at the back of me. So my spleen's here. So my gallbladder's on this side. So we're seeing where that bile duct is coming in, piercing that posterior aspect of the pancreatic head. And then here, if we look at my aorta, IVC, so aorta on this side, that celiac axis has that splenic artery cruising around that superior anterior, and then coming back from my spleen towards the back of me is going to be that more posterior inferior splenic vein coming in to go into my liver.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Okay, so here we are. Not seeing super amount of uncinate. No, he's kind of hitting a little bit.
We don't need it anymore, Shea, because the battery died.
Oh, okay.
Just
Yeah.
to relieve you of that.
Nothing going on. Okay, not really seeing much of our uncinate, but here we are. Here is our head, coming into neck, coming into body, and coming into tail. So here our spleen, we're not seeing very well, but our spleen is all the way down here. So here's that splenic vein going in that posterior aspect. And that SMV, IMV are cruising into here, and then it becomes the portal splenic confluence, and then it's going to head all the way over to liverland. And then we have aorta here, SMV, I don't know why they call it AMS, who knows. And then IVC right in here.
Is this transverse or sag?
Transverse, but slightly 7 o'clock. So whereas main portal veins love 10 o'clock, pancs love about 7 o'clock. Okay, so here that guy is. Oh man, these images are amazing. It's almost like, I don't know, if I were going to put together a midterm exam and ask like, what are 5 things in this image? Like, I don't know, I think that might be a great idea. But yeah, so in this case we are seeing, not really seeing vertebral body. So here's our aorta, SMA. We've got that IVC. Who's sneaking between the SMA and the aorta?
Renal.
Which one? Who? What?
Right.
Left.
Left renal vein. And then we've got pigtail coming into body, neck, head, and we're seeing a little bit more of that uncinate in this case. Right into here. Splenic vein coming in. That SMV, IMV are running this direction. This will become main portal vein and enter the liver. And then we've got a little bit of left liver lobe here. Remember we scanned liver, we took liverland, or pancland. This is our pancland. Okay, so now we're switching from kind of our 7 o'clock. We're going to go to SAG. So here's our IVC. Hi. Let's creep around back here. Oh, we're just about done here. So here's IVC, and this is at what we call the panc hamburger. Not super clean, but what we're seeing is the head of the pancreas. So we have main portal vein and cross section, and then here's the head of the panc. We'll get this in lab. Don't worry about it yet. Here we are again. So that's that. So right now, this main portal vein is coming this direction. It's getting ready to head to the liver in this way. It crosses the IVC aorta. It goes back that way towards the spleen, and this is where the SMA and IMV, or SMA, this should be SMV. SMV, IMV are coming in, and so it will be the panc hamburger. So we have the anterior portion is going to be the bun, which is our panc head, and the posterior portion is going to be the uncinate process. Okay, so we don't care about this. Do we care about this? Okay. So the head, we kind of talked about that. We saw it on that image. It's going to have that GDA and that CBD are going to be its little eyeballs. So who's on the bottom? Who's on the top? GDA, you got it. Okay, so here he is again. So aorta, we're seeing that SMA. Here's the splenic vein coming around, making that portal splenic confluence. SMV, IMV are coming in this way. And then we've got our 2 little heads. So CBD, the more posterior, GDA, the more anterior. Okay, so neck. We kind of just include the neck as kind of, it's between the head and body, but we kind of include the body. And that contains that ductus santorini, which is an accessory duct. So that's not our normal tank duct. He's just an extra little guy that hangs out. So splenic vein and artery run along the body, and then that has that main panc duct, the duct of Warsaw. And then that tail is going to extend towards that splenic hilum. So here we are. So here's our ductus santorini. He's this little tiny guy. This is our main panc duct. So he's going to confluence with that biliary duct, we're going to have that ampulla bonus, figure of Odie. And then you can see coming off that celiac, we've got our splenic artery going in, and the more posterior, this guy should be a little bit more inferior. But then we've got that splenic vein coming out, becoming main portal vein, kind of cruising out this way towards the liver. I think I've shown you this picture on a third time. I think we got it, right? I've seen this one go by. I think it's like the 4th time it's been in this problem. Okay, so here we are again. So here's that peg duct. So getting larger and larger and larger and larger. He's going to confluence with that biliary duct. So if he's dilated, we're going to look dilation here. If he's dilated too, we're going to look all around this neighborhood for some sort of obstruction. And then here's that duct of Santer and the accessory duct. And he doesn't usually get as dilated as the peg duct does with the duct of Forsyth. Okay, so what are we seeing in here?
The hamburger.
What's that?
The hamburger.
Not the hamburger.
Is not?
We're in transverse. We're seeing the pancreas long, so we're right about here.
Okay.
And what did we just talk about dilating? Maybe it's better on this side. That's our duct of Warson. Oh no. So we've got dilated duct of Warson. So aorta down in here. Aorta down in here. Portal splenic confluence. So this is like our uncinate coming around to the head, neck, body, tail. So we've got a dilated duct of Warson and a dilated, look at our CBD, how dilated our CBD is. So dilated CBD, dilated duct of Warson. So where are we going to be looking?
Where?
By the CBD.
Kind of, we know we've got dilated CBD at the panc head. So these confluence at the panc head, right?
Yeah.
We've got dilated duct of Warson, dilated CBD. They confluence together, so we're going to look in that neighborhood where they both come together. Okay, so here, this is not the best image, but you can see here's our dilated duct again. Why does it appear to be both of these? Why do they appear to have an echogenic wall? Physics, physics, physics,
Too flat.
physics. Is there a flat tor beam? Oh, shit. Okay, all right, you win. You win, buddy. They're flat tor beams, so they have a lot of specular reflections. They're reflecting a lot of our beam back. It's not that they're echogenic, we're just getting a lot of beam return.
Wait, so where that white arrow is that the duct of Warson or?
Right in here.
And what's that top one?
I think it's just pointing to the pancreas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, ignore this guy, but this is the duct of Warson. Okay, so, oh man, I wish I could name a bunch of things in this image. So let's start up here.
Skin.
Spleen, what?
Skin.
Oh, skin, okay, just checking. Okay. Yeah, and you can call it kind of the generic superficial fat and fascia.
Mm-hmm.
So superficial fat and fascia. Who's this guy?
Left lobe.
Left liver lobe. So what part is this?
Pancreas.
Okay, so let's start with the individual areas.
Uncinate process.
Head. Neck. Body. Tail.
Okay, how about this bad boy?
Splenic vein.
Okay,
Confluence.
you got it. And who's coming in this way?
SMA.
SMV.
SMV.
Ah, SMV, you got it. Okay, and then who's this guy?
IVC.
IBC, and who, we can't see him, but who's this imaginary thing going through here?
Left
Left,
renal.
right, who's this guy?
SMA.
SMA?
Aorta.
Aorta.
Oh shit, hang on. What do we got? No, you're fine. I just have to, are they changing anything or just have to?
Yeah, you wanna,
Thanks. So then who's this guy?
Aorta.
Okay, and then we decided who?
SMA.
And then we're not saying, but who would be posterior to this?
Vertebra.
It's fine, we got it. Okay, so here we are in CT. So remember anterior, posterior, right and left. So we've got liver up over here. Who is this guy?
Gallbladder.
Gallbladder. Who's all this guy?
Gas.
Gas, got it. And so we've got left kidney right in here. And
Bless you.
let me look up and see what I'm doing. So here's our kind of head, neck, body, and you can see how the tail goes all the way over to the spleen.
Mm-hmm.
And these things touch. We kind of don't think of these things as touching. Okay, here we are again. So in this case, we're not seeing it go all the way, but here's spleen, and the splenic vein goes all the way posterior, and then eventually will hit the splenoportal, what it's called, portosplenic confluence, and then it will end up in the liver. Who's this guy? Gallbladder. And let's see, who are we seeing a little bit of right here? Kidney. Hey, kidney. Okay, pancreatic location. I'm not going to get too crazy with this because we kind of already did it. And here we go. So here's that panc duct. Spleen's going to be over here, panc duct. You can see the stomach lives anterior to the pancreas. So if our patients have a lot of fluid in their stomach, sometimes that can help see the pancreas. Like, hey, drink some water. Other times it can be a hindrance if there's a lot of gas in their stomach. And, okay, here we go. That guy. For the radiologist, we don't measure, the only thing we measure is if we see that duct and it's dilated. Typically, what we're just going to comment on is its contour, echogenicity. Does this thing look globular? Does it look inhomogeneous or homogeneous? And this is the first glandular tissue that you're going to look at. Testicles are glands, thyroids are glands, submandibulars, carotids are glands. So this is the first gland that you're going to look like. So keep an eye out for how this tissue appears, because glandular tissue is going to come back and come back. And it's very homogeneous, mid to low level, right? Adjacent fluid collections, which we'll talk about when we get into pancreatic pathologies, but these things love to leak juices out into their neighborhood, and they're a digestive organ, right? So what do you think they're doing to the stuff in our body? Digesting it. It's gnarly. So yeah, we want that. And then again, if we see that duct, if I see it with any prominence, I'll put calipers on it, but definitely if it's over 2 millimeters, I'll comment on it. Okay, so what are the main components of the biliary system?
Ducts.
Okay, let's start from the liver side.
Left and right hepatic ducts.
Left and right hepatic ducts,
Common hepatic duct.
common hepatic duct,
Cystic duct.
cystic duct. Is anybody else going to answer? Or maybe? It's going to be quick. Gallbladder.
Common bile duct.
Common bile duct.
That's
Pretty much it. I'm looking at you expectantly, but I guess then there'll be the ampulovator or the
Sphincter.
what organ structures landmarks are associated with pancreas?
SMA,
Splenic
spleen,
vein, portal vein,
SMA,
SMA.
Aorta.
So aorta, kind of, yeah, you can find it along the aorta. Splenic artery, liver. You've got all those things that we kind of looked at in that image. And then what's so confusing? Okay. All right. Well, that's all I've got for you. So real quick, Mike is here, so if you guys want to get started.